This is the Constructionist Podcast, where we take ancient stories, the person of Jesus, current events and topics, and help you construct a new Christian worldview that's relevant and loving to those around you. I'm your host, Kevin Bates. I'm a semiotician and community builder looking at the signs of the times to build a better future together. You are tuned into the Constructionist Podcast, and tonight we are continuing our series on the book of Mark. We encourage a worldview here at the Constructionist that is built on the principles of Christ, and in this episode we will be examining the life of Christ through a clear and honest lens. So by doing so, we hope to offer insights and perspectives, some you might not have ever heard before, that will help you on your journey towards a greater understanding of love and compassion for yourself and others. We want to assure you that in tonight's episode, we are not going to be fabricating anything as many have done. So any information or ideas that we give will reference where we got them. And if we do make a guess, we're going to tell you we're guessing. Our goal is to provide an honest and authentic perspective on our examination of the text. So this is our thinking space, we call it, where we're presenting ideas and thoughts, and tonight we're making our best attempt to explain very practical theologies to live by. So if you enjoy the Constructionist Podcast and want to support us financially, please follow the link in the chat or the show notes on the social media platform you're listening to, and visit our Give page on that link. You can also support us through our Patreon page at The Constructionists. So your support will enable us to continue producing high quality content like this. But even more, we want to hear from you. We want to engage with you. We believe that through our interactions and discussions with listeners like you, we can continue to learn and grow together and develop what we call a communal hermeneutic. So we value your feedback, your questions, your ideas, and we are excited to build a community around our shared exploration. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us and let us know what you think. All right, we are in Mark 12 today. We ended on Mark 12 in the greatest commandment, and we're going to continue that and hopefully get through the end of chapter 12 today. So if you want to reference that in a device that you are looking at or in a Bible that you have, we're using the Contemporary English Bible, but we're also interpreting things. Common English Bible, and we are interpreting some things from the Greek, and when we're in the Old Testament, from the Hebrew. So we want you to know that we go back to the original language. So Sharia and Jake, thanks for joining me tonight as we continue our Mark series. And so we're in Mark chapter 12. So let's pick up where we left off, and please, Sharia, would you mind reading for us first? Let's start with the beginning of the greatest command. Yeah, greatest command, the beginning.
Okay, so that's 12:28. Is that going to be popping up on the screen? Thanks, Rob. One of the legal experts heard their dispute and saw how well Jesus answered them. He came over and asked him, "Which commandment is the most important of all?" Jesus replied, "The most important one is, 'Israel, listen, our God is the one Lord, and you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your being, with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this, you will love your neighbor as yourself. No other commandment is greater than these." The legal expert said to him, "Well said, teacher. You have truthfully said that God is one and there is no other besides him, and to love God with all of the heart, a full understanding, and all of one's strength, and to love one's neighbor as oneself is much more important than all kinds of entirely burnt offerings and sacrifices." When Jesus saw that he had answered with wisdom, he said to him, "You aren't far from God's kingdom." After that, no one dared ask him any more questions.
So that's kind of the shutdown ending there, I think. Well, we kind of ended on the loving yourself. So it says in the scripture there to love your neighbor as yourself. And we kind of broached on the idea that loving others is a form of loving God, and loving God, we will love others. So we just kind of crested that. So we need to go back to that too. But I think that in order to love other people, we have to have some self awareness, and we have to have some space and some time and thought awareness about like how we treat ourselves and what we treat ourselves with. I think that there's tangible things that we can do, and there's also negative self-talk that we can have. So some things are very tangible, some things are just kind of trapped in our own head of how we treat ourselves. So treating ourselves well to me would be a positive framework of thought that we have, and also a positive set of tangible ideas that we adopt or practice or do in our life. So let's talk about that a little bit. I don't know what all that you two do to love yourself, but maybe you can give some thoughts or ideas on some practices that we can have, some tangible practices, but also what does that mean to love yourself? Like just philosophically, what does it mean?
That's a big question.
It is a big question.
I think some of the easy basics are just like looking after your physical health, things like getting enough sleep,
Mhm.
getting hydration, eating good food when you
Right.
can, getting some movement, even just 15 minutes of movement or activity is really impactful for mental health. Um, so those things are a great place to start. For me personally, I need to get my hands in the dirt and plant some plants and watch them
Right.
grow.
You've
Um,
told us that before. Like what does that do for you? Like when you garden or you well, I don't know if you garden or you plant trees or like what do you do?
yeah, all of the above. If it's a plant, I will
Okay.
plant it.
All right.
Um,
Yeah.
I think for me, it's connection to something bigger than me. Um, one of the things I'm trying to focus on is native plants and native ecosystems. And so trying to be a part of that to facilitate a healthy ecosystem, even if it's only in my own yard, um,
Hmm.
gives me a sense of connectedness.
Okay. So when you produce a natural ecosystem that you are within, like your home,
Hmm.
you feel connected somehow to the earth. That's what you're saying,
Yeah.
and that makes you feel good about who you are,
Hmm.
in a sense, in an indirect
Yeah.
way. Okay. Well, Jake, why don't you give us some insights on loving self?
Um, I think being creative is one part of it, and also resting is another a big aspect of loving yourself. When you go back even to the creation narrative,
Mm-hmm.
God created, and then God rested, and that was the whole purpose of being, that we create and then we go into a season of rest as well. And so throughout the Old Testament and part of the New Testament, it talks about the idea of Sabbath,
Hmm.
the Sabbath rest, and that doesn't have to be this passive action. It can be anything that gives you joy, brings peace to community. But also a caveat with Sabbath is that it takes from no one else. And so
Mm. Right.
with with Sabbath and looking at who benefits the most from it, even though you're resting, you are letting your most poor neighbors rest as well. So if we all didn't shop on one certain day, then everyone would have to pause as well on that certain day. That's like old blue laws from a long time ago. Um,
Right,
There,
right.
there was very negative things, but also very, very positive aspects as well to it. That we had to end economic commerce on one day, so that the migrant worker, the poor, the animals, at the time, that those could rest as well. That we weren't just running people into the ground, because the people that could afford to rest were the ones that took that rest. And so
Right,
the
and that's
idea
the
of
thing is rest, or even what we're talking about, is a very privileged conversation. Even having land to be able to cultivate,
Hmm.
to create an ecosystem to have that opportunity is, I think, a privileged conversation. I mean, I have land too. I can go cultivate. I don't, but I can go cultivate, uh, a garden
a
myself too.
masterful
So,
garden.
right, right. Um, and even the idea of taking a day off, for the single parent who, works 2 jobs 7 days a week just to make it, because there's not another person, taking half the load, or whatever the cause of that disparity is. I think it is a privileged conversation. And in our privilege, um, I think when we love ourselves, we can love others better when we take the privilege and utilize it for, like, goodness. And
Hmm.
that's where we have a problem in our society. I think that the privilege, like, I'm privileged, or I have a right to garden or to rest. I have this right, and then I only use it for myself. That's not necessarily loving self. That's just doing more. That's selfish in a sense, the language of selfishness. So I think utilizing, or having the heart to utilize whatever our privilege is, to love ourselves in order to love others. I think is that the reciprocate. That's the flow out,
Hmm.
um, of what we have.
Yeah.
So go on, Jake. You were going to say more.
Well, if you look at your rate of consumption, and really loving yourself is not to overconsume. That's a whole nother problem of that we fall into a lot of obesity and diabetes and heart disease and
Mm,
so really loving yourself and knowing about your consumption and what you take in, the more that you rest from that consumption, the more you're giving to and loving other people in that as well.
mm,
That our purchasing puts people into poverty, and our purchasing also takes people out of poverty.
mm. So let's just talk about this subject, just, um, because we've talked about emotions, we've talked about, mental illness before in this podcast, but there is something to, depression, and then just the collapse to the inside, where when we're depressed, that we are inward focused, where we just focus our thought life and our negative thought life into self. And and that's people everyone goes through that. Everyone experiences that. But when it becomes chronic, or when it becomes clinical, that's when it, is more termed a mental, illness, or mental dysfunction. So, lower serotonin levels have always been thought to cause depression, which is no longer, like, necessarily true. Um, People have lower serotonin levels than others that aren't depressed. I think it's more, how do we utilize our serotonin versus, necessarily lower or higher serotonin levels. There's, serotonin uptake inhibitors that definitely maintain serotonin levels in the brain, but they're starting to think in the research that depression is more tied to dopamine and dopamine releases and such. And I'm sure that there's a neurobiological sense as well to the science that it's a mix of all of this. But one caveat or one thought that is pretty consistent through all like depression research and such is when we move, when we eat, when we get sunlight, when our eyes actually are in the sun, that we actually are changing our neurobiology and our biology in general when we
Don't
do
forget
these
sleep.
things. Oh, and sleep, yes. And with, especially men and testosterone levels during nighttime sleep, REM sleep, in your ability to just create and be able to think on a on a regular basis. That all is dependent on sleep. So if you're not getting sleep, if you're not able to move, if you're not, like Sharia said, just eating well when you can, or getting out in the air, and you feel, and because of all that, you're experiencing a low grade of depression, my recommendation is that we would go to a licensed professional counselor, to be able to work through some of the issues that we're facing and what's causing the depression. But this definitely has a direct effect on loving self, and whether we A, feel worth it, whether we B, feel like we have the time for it, energy for it, what am I supposed to do with it, loving self. So I think that depression, because it's just so prevalent in our society today, and clinically people are increasing in the diagnosis of depression over a period of decades here, that it makes sense that the loving of self would just be voided. It would be a void. So I think for me, loving myself with all of my own mental stuff that I have just in, who I am, I think more it has to do any more with space. And do I have space to think? I've always been that Christian person, that evangelical Christian person. Now I'm ex-evangelical Christian person. But now when I was evangelical Christian person, there was prayer and there was Bible reading. And if you didn't do your prayer, Bible reading, go to church and, some group and serve in ministry on Sunday morning for the church, that somehow you were less than. Somehow you weren't hitting the mark with your Christianity. And so then you would lie and say, oh yeah, I pray. Or you would lie and say, oh yeah, I read my Bible. And then you would get into Bible trivia and you try to do your very best, because you wanted people to be impressed by your Bible knowledge. And so we had this checklist to be a good Christian. You had these like 5 simple things that you did. Prayer has always been one of those things that I've just struggled with. If my salvation was based on prayer, I would be in the lowest levels of hell. So that's where I would be. So I'm starting to think today, as we're having this discussion and other discussions that I've had this week about prayer, that we haven't promoted enough silence and we haven't promoted enough thinking space. And I think part of me, Kevin Bates, loving myself means that I would have a level of silence and thinking space, that I could just think of the next thing that I need to do or to accomplish or to be. What do you guys think of that?
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Shreya, what can you speak to on Enneagram and rest?
Oh,
Probably quite a bit, but it's can you get more specific? Like, where do you want to go with that? You can't get more specific. All right.
Sorry, I had to fix my audio real fast.
Okay.
So Kevin's a 7, probably.
Yep.
yeah.
And
That was a very 7 thing to say.
as I do it,
Just did.
as I quickly look up Enneagram and rest via type, like it was verbatim. It was verbatim almost what was coming out of his mouth to what was
Oh, interesting.
spoken. And so,
Okay.
and I think I saw this post like last week, and it talked about rest or self-care and what your Enneagram is. So as a 7, you need rest and silence because you're talking a lot and you're the enthusiast.
Okay.
So can you talk to any more about like different types and what they might need? Because you know a lot more about Enneagram than I think the both of us do.
So I can think of 2 numbers that do stand out, and actually 3, but you and me, Jake, I'm pretty sure we represent both of them. So I'm a 5 on the Enneagram, and the way that relates to my energy levels is that I have a set measured amount for each day. It doesn't roll over. It doesn't, like, once it's out until the next day. And so that means I need to make sure that I have space or quiet or sleep or whatever that looks like each day, because I can't save it up for when I need it. And Jake, I'm pretty sure you're an 8. Is that correct?
As far as I'm aware, yes.
Yeah. 8s are considered one of the highest energy numbers on the Enneagram. So congratulations for that. Beyond that, I can't speak to
what is congratulations to 8? What is
having one of the highest energy levels on the Enneagram.
Oh, I know, it drives me nuts.
So
Kidding.
I can't necessarily speak to your needs for rest. But then the other one that comes up is 9, and 9 is considered to have the lowest energy level on the Enneagram. And so that's also going to mean something for the amount of rest that somebody needs.
Well, like your self-care and rest. So like if I look at a 4, they have to be for their best rest or their best health self-care is connected with your physical or the physical world. So like working out or working in your garden, that's like verbatim, which is funny. Now,
before we continue with the Enneagram, isn't it responsible to say that just type-based personality or type-based, like these kinds of things, whether you're talking about a Myers-Briggs ENFP, that's what I am, number 7 on the Enneagram, that to actually use these as psychometrics is, I mean, they're just general. Wouldn't you classify these as general talking points about how people operate and personality versus like quantifiable data in psychometrics?
They're descriptive, not prescriptive.
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to clarify.
That will fit better than others, but also Enneagram is really dynamic and complex, and there are so many other things you can look at just besides your number, that it does kind of account for a lot of complexity.
Okay. Now, there just a side note. Some Christians believe the Enneagram is, evil and
That's
comes
probably
from.
because of the. My theory is that that's because of the diagram.
Yeah, that's a good one. It looks like a
The
Well,
pentagram.
diagram looks like a
yeah,
pentagram and it freaks people
Yeah.
out.
yeah.
It's
Well, and I'm
nine-sided.
just saying that because I mean, just to give note to that some people have never heard of the Enneagram. Um, some people have. So look it up, ENN. So Enneagram. Um, and so you could do your own research or your own reading on it. Some people think it's evil. Some people think it's from demonic channeling or whatever. Um, I'm kind of kidding, but not really. People do, but lots of people think that lots of things are from demonic channeling. Um, and so I just want to make sure that personality testing or type based testing, we have to be very careful because it's not psychology.
Some are.
Like,
Well, Jungian psychology and the Myers-Briggs, that's what's all based on. And so, like, Myers-Briggs is probably the most psychologically backed personality inventory. But it's only
well, I've had some
descriptive.
psychologists totally disagree with that. I don't want to disagree with you. I'm just saying that psychologists will disagree with that because of maybe what's been done with it.
I think it's more about what has been done with it because it's it is descriptive, not prescriptive. So like if you're a
Sorry, your voice is your sound is kind of crackly.
If you're a certain type or a certain number, or you're a lion or a bear or whatever you're going to be, golden retriever, I forget what all of them are, otter. If you're a D on the disc or whatever personality inventory you are, are there some psychology based on? Yes, but it is a basis to understanding yourself with all of your idiosyncrasies and quirks. It is not to say that you have to act a certain way or you are destined to be this way or dysfunctions you have are based upon this, and so there's no reason for you to change.
Yeah, I think that
So like the
I
biggest
think
one
what you said
that
I think what you said at the beginning about prescriptive versus descriptive is really important because a lot of times people, and I've watched people just observing that people use tools like this as a prescriptive method to overcome certain dysfunctions or overcome certain trends in their life. Now, I think that if you understand yourself, you can put in other practices and tools, but just knowing your personality number on the Enneagram does nothing for your brain besides understand a little bit more why you act the way that you do. But you still need to go to a licensed professional counselor to work through your crap. So I think that just people use these tools like, okay, I got my Myers-Briggs number or my Myers-Briggs letters dialed in, and so therefore I can live a successful mentally healthy life. And I think that that's really more a prescriptive look, because I know psychologists who use the tools, but not in psychotherapy necessarily, like the actual like therapy to getting more mentally healthy. And maybe I'm wrong. I'm just kind of thinking out loud. I just want to make sure that the Enneagram, when we start using these terms and saying, using these methods or talking about these methods, that we give it proper weight. Can I just say that? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
it's not scripture.
Well, it might be more than scripture in a sense. It's different than scripture.
No, and it is.
That's a better way to say that. Yeah.
But the wild tangent we just went on was because we all fell into, as I was reading a little bit, we all fell into the descriptive methods of our need and what our need for rest is.
Yeah.
You can rest in other ways. Yeah. That was a wild and long tangent. I'm sorry.
Totally. No, it's fine. It's fine. So our rest, Sharaya, did you have any other input to give on rest, Enneagram?
I don't think so. Nothing terribly relevant.
We brought rest up because rest is a form of loving self. Mm-hmm. And everybody experiences rest differently. I would say that some people rest when they play. Some people rest when they rest and sleep and put their feet up. Some people rest when they're doing a tangible thing, and keeping their, minds busy in a different realm. So we have to be careful about how we define rest for everybody. Sleep and rest are different. Mm-hmm. Okay.
I mean,
that's a form of rest, but it's different.
Yeah. So you can rest by sleeping. Is that what you're saying?
No, I've slept and I have not rested.
That's true.
Yeah, that's very true.
I mean, when I'm under stress, you just wear one of those, Garmin tool watches, on your wrist, and you look at the metrics in the morning, and you can see that, you're literally like choking restless out in the middle of the night because you have sleep apnea. That's not mm-hmm. rest. That's sleep, but it's not rest. So there's a difference there, I think. But I'm not a psychologist nor a sleep doctor, so I'm just from my own experience and talking to others.
Yeah. I do have
Should we move forward?
No, I have one more huge point on this
Okay,
passage.
So fix your audio and let's move forward with your one big point.
Luke, the very next section, or the next part of this passage, is Jesus is asked, "Who is my neighbor then?" And he goes into this long parable of the Good Samaritan. That the idea that would have been is that the Samaritan is the biggest outside cast. Did we talked about Samaritans in the past?
I'll give a definition for.
Well, your pause though. You were muted for just a second, so I think what you were saying is that when this passage shows up in the book of Luke, not in the book of Mark, right, that's when it's placed before this parable of the Good Samaritan.
Yes, and how radical that next section is. It's interesting that Mark did a different style here and moved on from it. But Luke definitely drives home who is my neighbor, and it's the person that I struggle the most with in life.
So why do you think Mark left that out?
Probably the need
seems
of the
pretty
church
important
today.
To the story.
Yeah, I mean,
because in Mark it just sounds like that he says the greatest command and then is in total agreement, like the legal experts are in total agreement. That's what it sounds like to me.
and I think they were in agreement until, and Luke was more probably wanted to bring out the more provoking nature of Jesus' message. And whether or not it happened in this order or that the narrative fit better, that Jesus told in the parable of the Good Samaritan was the person that the Pharisees saw as the most unclean.
But I think another possibility is, rather than Mark leaving the Good Samaritan out, it could have been Luke adding that in. Because if Mark was written first, which is most likely, it makes more sense that Luke would have more access to more information and then choose to include more information.
Yeah, and I believe the greatest commandment is in every gospel, but the Good Samaritan is only in one of them. And so probably for the day, especially for Luke's audience, who is my neighbor? Who should I love? And it's the person that you find the most unlovable.
It just surprises me that that's not in Luke. I mean, in Mark. It's in Luke, but it's not in Mark. That surprises me.
It's not in Matthew, and it's not in John.
Yeah. So why do you think that was important for Luke, or is that just an addition?
I think Luke tends to focus much more on the plight of the needy than the other gospels do. Like, it's definitely a present topic in each of the gospels, but Luke is very focused on the experience of the marginalized and what it looks like to care for them and bring them back in community.
And if you follow like Luke and then Acts, supposedly the same writer, the narrative follows that it's this outsider group of people that will be taking it next. And so Luke is dealing with a huge division in the church that he's trying to reconcile.
Yeah, because it doesn't go outside of what Jesus would have said or could have said. It's just, did he say that? I just wonder sometimes when I'm reading the Bible and I see there's such a difference there and such a focus in Luke compared to Mark, and it's not in Matthew, it's not in any of the other, it's nowhere else to be found except in Luke. And Luke has this special emphasis. It's like, well, maybe Luke said that.
But I mean, if you
is that okay? Is that okay for us? Like, are we okay with that, or just
we have to be?
Because I'm okay with that.
Yeah, if we went to an event and we all wrote down our experience, it would be different. Because our focus would be different.
Right.
Because our Enneagrams are different.
In the, like, to use Isaiah, for example, 3 books in one, and the second 2 are like attributed to, but more in the sense of after the tradition of the prophet Isaiah, right?
Right.
So if that story came from Luke's brain rather than the mouth of Jesus, does it still count if it's in the tradition of Jesus?
Like, because it's obviously in the tradition of. Wow, we're having some.
Here I am.
That was fun.
Oh yeah, I gotta take my last image off there, Rob.
I don't know what happened there, but we'll just continue. It's okay.
Switch devices.
So, there it is. Oh no, I'll just keep that picture up. Oh.
It's okay.
Oh, there we go. There we are. Thanks, Rob. Sorry.
Was that you or was that Rob?
I'm on a different computer. I'm on a different computer, and it reloads when it thinks the web page is taking up too much data. So here I am.
Oh, I see. There you are. Okay, so I just think that needs just a special note that. We're saying that something's in Luke, but it's not in anywhere else. And a special just like caveat of, hey, it's okay that this is in here. And even though it's not anywhere else, and maybe Jesus said it, maybe Jesus didn't say it, Marcus Borg probably would have redlined that one and and said Jesus didn't say it. But does that matter? I think that people get so hung up on like the red letters have to
Mm-hmm.
be consistent and have to be in order for it to be a true document. Um, there's a lot more bigger problems with the documents than them not matching exactly with other documents. So I just since it's not in Luke, I mean it's not in Mark and it's in Luke, I just want to bring some emphasis to that to make sure that our listeners understood that it could have been from Luke's perspective. But it doesn't mean that Jesus didn't have that heart. And so who is our neighbor? Jake, you mentioned that's the person that we struggle with the most, or that is the biggest outsider, the biggest other in our life. And so who is that for us? I mean, can we be honest? Is that too honest just to name it?
Probably.
Yeah.
Well, in general, yeah. Well, yeah, because I guess
Not gonna
this
say
is
names.
online. Yeah. Oh, yeah. How about with the church? I mean, when I think about the church in general, like the big C, just universal, I think of right now, women are under attack again. Well, they've always been under attack, but now just this special emphasis from, the Southern Baptist movement and making this declaration that women can't be in certain roles, even though they have been in certain roles. One person was in a role for 30 years, I think, and they finally kicked that church out, kicked Rick Warren's church out. So I think about like women being under attack, LGBTQ under attack, very hateful, very, very hateful. Like some things that I read and followed on social media, death threats and just crazy violence. Like I'm just like, where are we? If our religion equates to violence, we have the wrong religion. If our religion equates to hate, we have the wrong religion. Christianity does not equate to violence, and the conclusion of Christianity is not violence or hate. So we really need to check those emotions and really process through why we're experiencing that towards other people. But so what are some others that we have experienced lately? Immigrants.
Everybody on the political spectrum.
Yeah, one side or the other, right?
I think it feels like people are very much polarized right now, whatever hill they want to die on.
Mm. So whatever hill they're willing to die on, that person that's basically sacrificed is that Samaritan person to them. Yeah, I think about like when I'm, standing at the pearly gates and being asked some questions. Doubt that'll happen, but let's just for metaphor's sake go with that. Illustration's sake. I'm not going to be judged for my neighbor's behavior and what I thought of it. I'm going to be judged on if I loved my neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
In essence, that's, following the commands of Christ. You are my friends if you keep my commands. So I think that obedience to love is really crucial right now in Christianity. That we would be, our first line of obedience would be loving our neighbor. But then that takes some internal work of loving self. If we can't, and I think that people who hate and issue violence and, they're out just like hating on people, posting on social media, whatever their hateful memes are. That there was a mayor that just stepped down. He resigned because he was on some private Facebook thing group posting all this hate stuff, and he was out being a mayor and like outwardly showing inclusion and going along with, you know, all of the like the, I guess, the circumstance of the day. He was going along with that, and then like that day he would go back and he would post on this hate group, and he would just hate on people that he just was shaking hands with in public. And so that was really kind of unnerving that somebody would be that duplicitous in life. So he just stepped down and resigned. I think that has more to do with self than the other people.
Can I read a quotation?
Yeah, please.
So this is attributed to Thomas Merton. It says, "The beginning of love is to let those we love be perfectly themselves, and not to twist them to fit our own image. Otherwise, we love only the reflection of ourselves we find in them."
It's good.
Can you read that one more time just to embed that? Yeah, thank you.
"The beginning of love is to let those we love be perfectly themselves, and not to twist them to fit our own image. Otherwise, we love only the reflection of ourselves we find in them."
And I would say, is the same true for our hate? That when we hate ourselves in certain ways, we find that in other people and we attack that in others. I'm not going to say all the time, but sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of times.
This might be a good transition into the next slide.
Oh, I was just basting in that a little bit. I think that, but we can move on.
No, I think it's right there actually, because it's the hypocrisy of it all, right?
Oh yeah, that's true. While Jesus was teaching in the temple, he said, "Why do the legal experts say that the Christ is David's son?" David himself, inspired by the Holy Spirit, said, "The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right side until I turn your enemies into your footstool." David himself calls him Lord. So how can he be David's son? The large crowd listened to him with delight. As he was teaching, he said, "Watch out for the legal experts. They like to walk around in long robes. They want to be greeted with honor in the markets. They long for places of honor in the synagogues and in the banquets. They are the ones who cheat widows out of their homes, and to show off they say long prayers. They will be judged most harshly." Jesus sat across from the collection box for the temple treasury and observed how the crowd gave their money. Many rich people were throwing in lots of money. One poor widow came forward and put in two small copper coins worth a penny. Jesus called his disciples to him and said, "I assure you that this poor widow has put in more than everyone who's been putting money in the treasury. All of them are giving out of their spare change, but she, from her hopeless poverty, has given everything she had, even what she needed to live on." Yeah, that's true that we go around like a legal expert of the law, but we all do that. I mean, I want to be seen as good in public, I don't want to be seen as some, like lame-o that I'm just out there, after I'm done talking, I'm just some jerk, like, look at that guy. Like, so I want to present myself well. So we all present ourselves well, or try to. We all try to be articulate. I mean, I don't want to be the worst prayer around the table, But it's like when we're doing these things and then we're treating the widow with shame, like we're just issuing shame on the widow. Um, I think that's the the comparison there. Um, I don't think there's anything wrong with trying to do your best, even if your best doesn't match your all the time. Just being honest.
Mm-hmm.
But what is the reason for your best? Is it to do your best, or is it to be seen as the best, or is it to be
Right.
Well, I
notarized
mean,
as the best?
don't you want to be seen as your best?
Seen as the
I
best,
mean,
or
what's the alternative? I'm gonna go out and like I want to be seen as my worst.
just not be seen,
What's the
right?
alternative?
To not be seen.
I guess. Yeah.
I mean, when you look at like other passages, Jesus said, "Don't let your left hand know what your right hand gave," or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That's the action of not drawing attention to oneself.
Yeah. Well, I remember my grandmother, she used to like when I not look my best, she like, would you put on some nice clothes? Like where it's Christmas. So like
These are my
during
eating pants.
Christmas. I know these are my eating jammies. So, so like I just like want to have an honest perspective that I think that we're all like Pharisees. I think that it crosses a line when we're so fake and we're then treating the widow with, I want to look my best and treat the widow with honor. I don't want to like look my best and, you know, stomp her down.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a term that's thrown around a little too loosely, I think. But this is the idea of like a spiritual abuse in this passage. I think
Yeah.
you're being
Yeah.
you're being simplistic and great. I think it's all true, and it can be taken as this person is being abused by people that think that they are right, righteous, the best, and not giving space for her as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this story kind of pisses me off because nobody steps in to help the widow after she has given everything she needed to live on.
Even Jesus.
Right.
Yeah. It's like, here, after that lesson, here, take your widow's mites back, please. Like take
Yeah.
these mites
Right.
back. I mean, we're not gonna
Thank you for being
we're
my
not gonna
object
take
lesson.
these from you.
You can
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you for being the object lesson. Yeah.
move
Well,
on now.
I get what you're saying, Jake. I do. I just wonder, like, Christians do this all the time. They take these passages and they don't have an honest view of reality, right? And I had a professor once that like he drove a dumpy car, like a really dumpy car. And he said, I don't think any Christian should own a decent car. I'm like, why? Like, where do you get that? Don't you want a good running car to get around and get? I mean, I understand that, like, well, it's just, a waste of money and too showy. And we should be like, and he would say, we need to be like that person on the side of the road, that widow type personality. And I go, well, yeah, but like, who is ever going to be able to give to the widow?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there is a balance here, like, of our perspective of what we have and what is hoarding and materialism, what is too much, what is our version of enough. I believe we're all rich in the United States. That if you have a job and you have a car and you have yes, in philosophy we are.
Mm-hmm.
But not in practicality. It's wrong to say we're all rich in the United States. That's like practically that's wrong, because poverty is relative to where you are. And
Mm-hmm.
so, somebody that, so that's when we abuse with our halvesy type,
Mhm.
um, living where that person should be thankful because we're all rich in the United States. Well, why don't you give them $1,000 then? I think the Christians just take these passages and they don't just have an honest,
Conversation with
real
them.
view. Yeah, and it's
Mhm.
like you're right. It's like, well, why didn't the widow, like, that angers me too that you bring that up because I've never seen that. It's like, why why wasn't the widow taken care of? Why wasn't that the object
Mhm.
lesson?
Because we're not in the
You
book
know,
of Luke, I guess.
what happens at the end of this book or the end of this chapter in Luke? Anyway, I'm just kind of going off there a little bit because like I knew a guy that was a pastor that he like wore ratty clothes and wouldn't shower because he didn't want to be seen as a Pharisee. And I'm like,
Mhm.
well, how about just like take a shower and wear clothes without, like stains and holes in them. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong there. Maybe I need a new perspective, but
Well,
I
it
think
seems like.
the
Oh, go ahead, Jake.
please, you first.
Um, it seems like when we interpret the passage that way, we get really caught up on what the behavior looks like. Um,
mm-hmm.
when I think Jesus is talking about the judgments that we place rather than um, the actions that we're taking in the marketplace situation. Um, are
Yeah,
we looking down on people? Um, are we trying to get people to look up at us?
right.
What's
Yeah,
what's
because it has to be more than behavior. Because who's the other in Dubai or Singapore? Like you go to Singapore and you're like, okay, does anybody like is anybody houseless here? Like, I'd have to look at some statistics, but
I'm
I
sure there
look
are.
at some of the. I'm sure there are, but it's like, okay, who's the other in these different places that are like super wealthy, super like you know
Affluent.
affluent, yeah, privileged, whatever. So yeah, I mean, like it has more to do with the heart of judgment. It has to.
Well,
Christians
those
are
are
goofy that way, though.
Yeah,
They've
but
taken
behavior is easier
passages
to
like this.
manage than your thought life, right?
Exactly. It's like let's just make it all about what we wear again and drive versus pointing fingers and
our
telling people
change.
they're going to hell. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Did we make it to the end of chapter 12?
We did.
We did.
Is there any other thoughts? Are there any other thoughts that we have?
I think we're good for now.
Well, we talked about Enneagram and we talked about all kinds of stuff. Well, I really appreciate the conversation today. It's fun to just noodle around and bounce around in these topics and to try to figure out meaning and try to apply them to our lives in a more real and honest way. So I really appreciate all of your inclusion of your thoughts. So with that, thanks Shreya, thanks Jake for participating. If you'd like to support us, go to the Constructionist Patreon page or to go to our Give page on the link in your show notes so that you can go to the Give page and link up to support us in any way. And if you have any questions about tonight's episode, you can also put those in, and we will either tonight or through the week, we will pick up those and respond to them. So good night, everybody. Thanks for joining us.